I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough, and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. Ron, I have a question for you.
I have an answer for you, but I'm not sure they match.
What is the worst boss you've ever had?
Ooh, that's easy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, without getting into this is a longer story, but let me give it in 3 sentences. My wife and I left a city when we got a call from a church for us to come down and be their interim pastor. And they said, you're young, you're just out of college, but this could work into being our pastor. So we knew the church, we moved. And from the time we said yes and we showed up, the church had gone through a split, and the people who called us weren't still there. So I had to go and find a job because I didn't have a job.
Oh.
So, at this time, this was during the first Middle East war. And the city, and matter of fact, many parts of the country, jobs weren't, just plentiful.
Yeah.
And so my wife told me, says, well, we need to do something. And she worked in banking. She got a job with a bank really quickly. And I'm like, so I went to work for a car dealer. The guy hired me, and I was selling Toyotas. And the guy who hired me was a Christian, good guy. And I thought, this is pretty cool. And so not what I want to do, but, it's something. And the guy who hired me got fired, and the GM was absolutely without scruples. I mean, just horrible, bad ethics. And I walked out on him. I've never but he lied to a customer. He lied. I'm like, I can't do this. I treat people fairly. And I wasn't there, but like 3 weeks total. I mean, it was just a whole bad set of circumstances.
You had to take this job and shove it moment.
I kind of did. I just said, hey, I will not, I can't. I said, I have ethics. I'm not going to violate those. I said, I'm leaving. I'm not going to be part of this. And that opened the whole door to my whole marketing background, because I went to work for a newspaper and then a Fox affiliate, and then had my own advertising agency after that. And kind of that whole background led me to where I am today. So the 3 weeks with the Toyota dealership was a predecessor or so forth to what God was doing.
Your story is way cooler than mine. I was 16 years old working at Sbarro's Pizza.
Yeah.
And the guy made me go back and wash dishes all the time, and I hated it. Really bad boss. Why are you laughing? Boss. The producers are laughing. You don't think I could work at Sbarro's Pizza? I mean, geez. Okay.
But not the donuts.
Listen, we're talking about bosses because not everybody has bad bosses. Some of them have good bosses that they actually want to spend time with.
Yes.
Why do you think I'm bringing this up, Ron?
You tell me.
Because at the D6 conference, you guys have a code, and we're giving it away.
That's right.
Now do you get my whole point?
I do. I thought you were bringing this up to talk about all the people you've heard complaints for in Randall House and D6 that hate their boss.
I
wasn't sure where you were going.
The people at Randall House love their boss, and some of our listeners love theirs enough that they actually want to spend time with them. So if they wanted to bring their boss, their senior pastor, to the D6 conference, if they pay their way, guess what they get to do?
Bring my boss.
Bring my boss for free. Just so you know, we want to make sure y'all understand that. All you have to do is put in the code Bring My Boss. Now that's all together, one word, no spaces. Bring My Boss is the code, and you'll get your senior pastor will come free as long as you purchase your ticket. It is a great deal that you might want to check out. And senior pastors, sometimes they need the love because it's not an easy job. But you know what's harder than being a senior pastor?
What's that? Being a senior pastor's spouse.
Yes, you are following me today.
That's right.
That's good.
All right.
We have our guest today, Angela Haynes, and she's going to be talking about, I love the title of this one. It's called This One's for All the Minister Spouses. And that's because it's not an easy gig. And For those of you that know of, if you aren't a minister spouse, send this one to your friend and loved one that is, because maybe they'll get some encouragement. Angela's super honest and just really wise about this topic, and you are going to love it.
And if you are a minister, you can be more empathetic.
Ooh, very good and true. So after the break, we're going to be hearing from Angela Haynes while you guys are signing up for the D6 conference and putting in Bring My Boss so that the pastor can come free. We'll see y'all after the break.
Are you looking for the right conference to attend this year? The D6 Conference is a family ministry conference designed for your entire ministry team. Come hear from over 30 speakers and network with churches that share your passion for reaching families. Family ministry isn't just another program. It's one of the most important things your church can do to make a difference in your city. At the D6 Conference, you'll be inspired and equipped to take your family ministry to the next level. To learn more about the D6 Conference, just go to d6conference.com.
Our guest today is Angela Haynes. She's a frequent speaker, radio guest, and co-author of the book Relentless Parenting, The Crucial Pursuit of Your Teen's Heart. She's a pastor's wife, a mother of 3 daughters, and a graduate of Texas A&M University. Go Aggies.
Can I say whoop?
That's right. Oh, man, I don't want to go off in Texas A&M, but I got lots of questions about that. There's so many traditions. Y'all have so many traditions.
Extreme traditions. It's hard to embrace them all.
There you go. So you are doing a seminar here for ministers' wives. Minister spouses, that's probably a better thing to say. And so I thought that'd be a great theme for our time. As you're sitting here, I'm remembering last time I interviewed you, there was like a bug flying around. You remember that? We
Yes,
were like,
the entire interview.
we were like doing this. So I'm hoping that we're bug-free for this one. Okay, so your seminar is called My Husband is a Pastor, Let's Talk. I love that. And that's what I want to do. So I want to have a talk about being a minister spouse and not just surviving but thriving in that role. There's a lot of people who their personality just doesn't naturally fit into that role. So I want to especially help them. So we hear a lot about challenges of being a minister spouse, but let's start with this. What are the benefits?
You know, I like this question. First of all, I'm not a pro at this. I mess up along the way, but it is a path that I'm walking and a path that I am grateful to be walking. So when you say benefits, I have actually received free eggs from people in our church on occasion, which it's wonderful. But for me, instead of approaching it from a benefit perspective, I look at it from the opportunity that God has given me from a biblical worldview instead of earthly, worldly benefits. You can't be in this role and expect or live for worldly benefits. So for me, I think that it is about being considered a servant. What an honor to be called a servant by God. God, in the world, a servant isn't looked highly upon, but in God's eyes, servants are what he desires. Jesus came to serve, taught us an example of servanthood. And so for me, if I can humbly embrace my humanity and abide in him, the one who has called me to this path, it's not a path I chose, but he called me to it, and consider myself a servant and rely on him to walk this path, then I pray that the benefits are for the kingdom's sake.
Good. Thank you. A minister spouse can't escape, though, from being in a public position. That's part of the service, I would say. Some spouses have the personality that loves public attention, and then there's others who absolutely hate it. So let's try to encourage a little bit the spouse who hates how public the role is.
Okay, I can encourage in this area because I don't like the public attention. I'm a quiet introvert. I recharge alone. However, on this journey for me, I've been in ministry for 22 years alongside my husband as a pastor, lead pastor for 8 years. For me, I have to remind myself of my first love, that love being God, not the church, not my family, not my husband, but my first love is God. And so if I remind myself consistently on a daily basis of who my first love is, then I want to abide with that first love. And in abiding with him, he gives me strength in what he has called me to. I think that every church, or I know that every church is unique. They're in a different location with different people, with different brokenness, with different blessings and different challenges. And I think that we have to be careful to stay true to God and our calling and what he calls myself as Angela, specifically to do to grow his kingdom. He says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, which means he's allowing me to be a part of his plan. And if I embrace that, instead of concentrating on the role of a pastor's wife, but instead, like we spoke about, being a servant of God, and it not being, maybe you aren't public, maybe you like being alone. God knows your heart, he knows your passions, and you pray to seek, how can I serve him in that capacity?
Perfect. How do you handle building relationships with church members who have the potential to turn on your spouse in a negative way?
Okay, so I necessarily don't build relationships with those people. I believe, according to my family and my spouse, that I really need to set healthy boundaries. I don't think that by being called to minister to a community or a church as a pastor's wife, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be friends with everybody. It doesn't mean that you have to friend people to prevent trouble or drama. Again, your first love is God, and you have to stay true to that calling. And by setting healthy boundaries, you are protecting the ones that he has called to walk according to his plan, to love others, to have influence with others. And I think that setting healthy boundaries is actually a good example for others. Everybody, no matter what their calling is, needs healthy boundaries. Because if we set ourselves in situations that tear us down instead of build us up, then it makes it more of a challenge to do what God has called you to do.
So, how would you suggest that a minister spouse goes about finding a place of service in the church? Because isn't it true that there are some places that expect a pastor's wife to fit a certain role, even if that's not how they feel gifted?
Yes, that's absolutely true. In fact, I know people that left our church when we first came as lead pastor and me as a pastor's wife, and I didn't lead the women's ministry. There are expectations. Maybe it's different at each church what those expectations are. But I have a strong conviction that God created me with certain gifts and passions and talents to bring him glory. If you love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, that's your passions, that's your giftings, that's your talents. That's how you're wired. God created you in his image for community and to grow his kingdom. And you have to recognize, and this is the same thing with recognizing how your children are wired and how they are, and to honor that and lift them up in a way that they can use those giftings and talents to glorify him. So for me to encourage those other spouses of pastors, just remind yourself that God created you uniquely to serve him in a unique way according to his commands, to love God and love others. And you're being faithful, actually, and obedient to God when you use the gifts and talents and passions that he gave you to bring him glory. So serve your king, not the kingdom.
Nice. They say that a minister's family lives in a fishbowl. Are you down with that thought? Do you believe that that's a real thing? And if so, how do you live in the fishbowl?
Unfortunately, it probably is a real thing. It's probably felt differently at each church. You can look at it a couple of ways. For me, I must embrace my humanity with humility, which basically means I don't know of a fishbowl that has fish in it without fish poop. Life is messy, right? And when you have kids, it's even more messy. So first embrace your humanity, and then when you serve God and abide in Him, then you can look at the fishbowl as an opportunity to show others how to walk through the mess. And if I faithfully love others through their mess with mercy and grace to draw them back to God, then hopefully that sets an example for them to be able to love us with mercy and grace and help us walk through our mess as well. Life is messy, and the whole point of ministry is to help people through their brokenness and to draw them back to God and closer to God. So I believe that the fishbowl is hard. It's hard when you have kids. I have to equip my kids to know how to embrace that in a healthy way without becoming bitter. But this is where God called us. And so if we love well, live well, abide in God, and we're vulnerable to who we really are, then hopefully God can use that for His glory.
That's great. Okay, I hope I'm not going too far with this question, but what do you do if you disagree with your spouse in either a sermon they're preaching or a decision they've made in leadership? That I'm sure that's never happened.
Oh, no,
But
never.
what do you do if it does?
This is such a great question. I'm blessed to be married to a pastor who is very biblically sound. I have never had to disagree with him in that. Now, when it comes to numbers and math, I've had to correct him. Or details to stories or which kid it was. But in all seriousness, I believe that we need to be affirming of our spouses in the ministry on a regular basis. That's very important to build that trust and that heart connection with them, is to be affirming with them and what they are doing well. Who doesn't want to be encouraged and affirmed in what they're doing and what they're pouring their heart and their time and their love into? In saying that, when you are affirming with your spouse and you need to address something that you disagree with in them, then that gives you opportunity to do this privately and positively, with positive criticism instead of a critical heart. So you always need to consider how you approach them and the reasons behind your approach. But first be affirming consistently. And then if you have to address them in a disagreement, which I think every marriage, what marriage doesn't have disagreement? You have to know how to approach any disagreement with a healthy desire and healthy approach privately, never in front of a community or even your kids. Men like to be affirmed. They like to be encouraged. I don't know of a man that doesn't. And we have to remember that's how God created them, and our spouses rely on us for that strength.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a bit of a follow-up on that one, because it's something I've been curious about forever. Do you see your husband as your pastor?
I do. I absolutely do.
You see what I'm saying? Because, you're so familiar with him. He's your husband. Can he also be your pastor, or do you need to find that somewhere else?
That's a great question. For me, I do view him as my pastor, and that helps me understand how he's pastoring to our community. I believe God put me under him as a spouse, but also a pastor. I think it's a great privilege. If I didn't view him as a pastor, then I would miss out on the challenges that he challenges the congregation to do for the sake of the kingdom. I'll give you one example. In 2012, he challenged our congregation to pray for influence. And I did, and I could sit here for hours and tell you what God has done with the obedience of praying for influence, using your giftings and your passions and how you're wired. And that was because I allowed myself to see my husband as my pastor, and I'm grateful for that. I think it's going to be a struggle for many people. So I think that's something that you need to pray for and seek God for an understanding is, did God place you with your husband not only to be influenced as a wife, but also as part of the congregation? And when you become part of the congregation, I think you learn to love them better.
Thank you for letting me get in your business a little bit there.
It's all right.
I realized I pushed a little bit.
It's the fishbowl, remember?
That's right. Well, okay, I'm going to keep going then. Because how about when the way the church treats your kids? That's got to be personal. It's one thing if they mess with your spouse. He's a grown man. But when they mess with your kids, how do you handle that? Or do they mess with your kids?
They do mess with my kids, and they have messed with my kids. And I would say it hurts. It hurts intensely when you see your kids hurt because of the ministry that you are in. God has guided me in this well, I believe. And I'm so grateful for that, because I beg God for wisdom daily on raising my children in this situation in a church. The first thing he convicted me of was that first comes their relationship with God. That is first and foremost. Also, he convicted me to equip them how to handle this very situation. And because my husband and I have been faithful in equipping our kids in that, I have seen my kids shine through situations that I wish they had never had to have been through. But to equip them how to rely on God as truth and love and perfect love. Not people, not mom, not dad, not brother, not sister, but God and God alone. And how to be wise in handling people that hurt you or disagree with you, or knock your parents even, because that's hurtful to a kid when they hear their parents knocked. You have to teach your kids how to face these challenges and criticism, because it's a life they live in. You can't take them out of it. They're in it. But I can tell you that because your kids see the behind the scenes in church, God can use it to do mighty, crazy things for his glory. And I see that in our daughter that has gone off to college this year. Because of her wisdom of what goes on behind the scenes, she's so wise in how to choose where God wants her to serve. She's so far ahead of where I ever was as a freshman in college. I don't even think I went to church the first couple of Sundays or weeks, and she's already interviewed 3 or 4 and sought out the type of church that God has called her to serve in. And I know that's because she has had to walk through these things with us. And so I don't want to sound insensitive to parents who are raising children in this situation, but I want to give them hope that yes, it's hard, but God chose those kids to walk this for a reason, because he wants to do mighty things with them.
I'm going to just keep going. Sometimes the pedestal that the church puts us on becomes comfortable, and no one gets to know the real us. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
As we are known, but no one really knows
Everybody
us.
wants to be seen. Mm-hmm. And when people already have an ideal of who you are, it's hard to be seen. This is a really hard question, but that pedestal puts a boundary up between you and people often. People want to approach you as a pastor's wife, but not many people want to approach you as a friend. It's intimidating to them, even though you didn't do anything to force the intimidation. It's the title, maybe, the virtual pedestal that's there. For me, I have to be really careful with this, because it wants to force me to be isolated. And remember that God didn't create us to be isolated. He created us in his image. He's a God of community, Father, Son, God, Son, Holy Spirit. He's a God of community. He created us to be with him in community. So for me to be obedient to God, I can't allow myself to be isolated in this role. I have to become part of a community that I can trust, that can be encouraging to me, that I can serve with, that have similar passions with me, and that will love us through the mess. So this pedestal can be avoided by finding community, a healthy community that you can be a part of, that you can love and be loved by.
I love it. Okay. I can't believe I didn't ask this, but I need to ask this. What about when people mess with your husband?
Oh, watch out.
I know, that's what I'm trying to say. I bet so many ministers, we need to talk about this, because this is probably one of the most hurtful things, because they probably feel like they can most go after him?
Well, there's a couple things that I do. One is I do air punches.
I'm glad it's air.
Yeah, I do air punches, but I have prayed often, almost daily, that God gives me wisdom when to speak and when not to speak. And if in all honesty, if I speak from my guts, sometimes it's not for God's glory. And the whole purpose of the calling is to bring God the glory. When people hurt my husband, you know, your first instinct as a spouse or as a parent is to fight back, to protect. You know, you love that person and you want to do anything to let them know that you want to protect them. However, the attack isn't always the best thing. So when people are hurtful to my husband, instead of my first instinct to speak or to attack, it's to go back to my husband instead and to build him back up. Often we, instead of embracing the person we need to embrace, we attack the person that's doing the attacking. And I think that we need to embrace our spouses or embrace our children and focus on building them back up and deal with the emotions that they're feeling. And remind yourself that a church is full of broken people, and often the attack comes from some hurt in them or brokenness. And so if you begin to see people through the eyes of God and understand that there's hurt and pain usually behind their hurt towards other people or towards us, then you can learn to love them through the eyes of God. That doesn't mean befriending them or taking them to lunch or anything like that, but it means to have compassion and concern for them and try to see them the way God sees them. That takes a lot of prayer. That's not a natural instinct for me.
I love it. Okay, well, you've given a gift to very many people. I really hope that this particular session is spread around from minister's wife to minister's spouse, all around. Thank you, because there's not enough people giving great content and help and encouragement in this area, so I really appreciate it. But before you go, I really want you to take some time, if you don't mind, to talk about the book you wrote last year, Relentless Parenting, The Crucial Pursuit of Your Teen's Heart. I love that title. Could you just share a little bit about that for people that are listening that might be parents of
Sure,
teens?
I'd love to. It's a privilege to be able to speak to this. It's a passion of mine that God has allowed me to have influence in. My husband and I are on the journey of being the primary faith trainer of our children and teaching them along the way in God moments, intentionally teaching them the truth of God's word and celebrating milestones. But what we have discovered is as your children grow, that all of this is necessary according to Deuteronomy, the Shema, love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But to have powerful influence with your children, you must be relentlessly pursuing a heart connection with them, because when you have this heart connection, then their ears and their hearts and their minds are sensitive to your teaching, and your influence with them becomes strong, and you are able to take your hand hold on them and hand it over to the Lord and allow them to walk in a relationship independently with God and become a servant to God. And through a crucial pursuit of your teen's heart, it's hard. It's joyous, but it's hard because family is messy. Kids are messy. We all live in brokenness. But my passion in this is, in order for parents to have the influence that God intended for us to have with them, to teach them His truth, we need a heart connection. Just like God created us to have with Him, He created us to have with our children, and that takes effort. And our book is practical ways how to do this or to rebuild this heart connection.
I encourage you guys to pick it up. Again, it's Relentless Parenting, the crucial pursuit of your teen's heart. You can find that online. You can find it at d6family.com. And also, please go to legacymilestones.com. This is a work that Brian Haynes and his wife Angela have put together, and you'll want to check that out as well. Thank you very, very much for serving
Jeremy.
And doing this now. I appreciate it.
Scripture and modern-day research attests to this truth. When one generation commits to and engages in the discipleship of another generation, people of all ages know Jesus and become more like him. This commitment requires us to say goodbye to the myopic focus on the next generation and instead broaden our view to every generation. Every generation. Moms, dads, grandmas and grandpas, aunts and uncles, kindergartners and middle school students, college freshmen and newlyweds, each one awakened to Jesus Christ and living out a vibrant faith with one another. We invite you to adopt this focus at the D6 Conference, a family ministry event built on the Deuteronomy 6 philosophy of generational discipleship. You will experience 3 days of strategy, resources, and action steps to help move your church forward together. Discover what's in store at d6conference.com.
So thank you, Angela Haynes. And thank you, I think we need to say thank you, Brian Haynes, for letting me talk all about you. Because that was, we kind of got into it a little bit about Brian's life too.
We did. But, when we know Brian, it just makes us want to pray more for Angela.
Yeah. Well, after hearing Angela talk about the way she feels when people mess with her husband, I don't think y'all should mess with Brian personally.
No. And that's
y'all should ease up.
That's exactly right. And that's true for most spouses like that. The claws can come out.
All right. So, hey, we have scheduled in this portion because a ton of our listeners are D6 conference attendees. And I'm hoping that somebody listening right now can be like the lady that I'm remembering from last year's conference who came up to me and said, you know what? I heard the podcast, and because I heard the podcast, it made me want to come to the conference. I hope somebody's like that. And so let's have a moment where you give some scoop. You are the keeper of the scoop. Let's have a moment where you give our listeners a little bit of insight into what they can expect this year. I know off air we have been talking. You are extremely excited about our lineup for this year and your plans, location. Just kind of give us pump us up, man. Give us a speech.
Absolutely. The key for any conference, when you evaluate a conference and you use a matrix, you talk about, okay, who's the speakers? What am I going to learn? What's the destination I'm going to? Those are the matrix you can put through. And if you're not careful, at the end of the day, it could be just destination wins out. Where do I want to go that's next to the beach or, the mountains or theme park or whatever it is? And that shouldn't be your sole discretionary reason for picking a conference. For us, it's always about what's the theme, what are we trying to teach, and what's the real deliverables? What do we give you to take home that you can absolutely put into practice immediately? This year's theme is called Church and Home. It is as basic as our intro to our podcast, Church and Home. And the reason that we keep emphasizing those fundamentals is the same reason why Vince Lombardi went into the locker room after a horrible first half and says, guys, this is a football. Let's talk fundamentals here. And he was talking to the best football team around, but he was giving them the basics, reminding them of what they needed to go out and do at the second half. And so we're coming in going, let's remember Church and Home, because most of our ministry leaders who listen to our podcast that are part of our conference, they do excellence at church. They get it at church. They have all the right components in there, but they don't know how to fully keep equipping moms and dads, and they almost want to throw in the towel and give up the fight and say, I can handle what I can manage, which is church. I can't manage a home that I'm not in week in and week out. And so this year we're putting a lot of emphasis on how do we take what we start at church and allow the parents to keep doing it at home. How do we make that difference? Even when the homes are broken, even when the homes are, we're going with blended families, kids have spiritually absent parents, if not physically absent parents. How do we deal with all of these topics and bring them home? And so with that, then we go down to where are we located? What are our speakers? Jeremy, I'm excited. We're taking our conference further east than we've ever gone before. We're going to be in North Carolina. So if you're looking to travel and fly in, I would fly into either Raleigh-Durham or to Charlotte and make the drive. It's closer to Raleigh-Durham, and for us, there's usually more flights, but Charlotte's a huge airport, big, easy to get to. You're about 35 minutes from RDU, and you're about an hour from Charlotte, and that's, depending on traffic either way. Now, you can fly all the way into Greensboro, And you're right there at the nicest convention center, the Curry Convention Center attached to the Sheraton of the Four Seasons. Beautiful property. It's the largest property there. I mean, just phenomenal. And so you'll be able to get in there with your team and you'll get to hear speakers. And we've been talking about them on the air. Who are you most excited about being there this year?
Oh, man.
And you can't say who we haven't announced yet.
Okay, I won't.
Okay.
Because I was thinking that. But,
I knew where your mind was because we just had lunch together.
That means there's secrets coming.
That's right.
Okay, so you know what? My wife and I, okay, I'm going to just say something, hopefully it won't take too long. I like Christian movies. I'm not necessarily in love with Christian movies, and so therefore I don't watch a lot of them, but I watched The Case for Christ. Because it showed up on my Apple TV one night when there wasn't much other option. So we clicked on it, and I watched Lee Strobel's story and loved it so much I bought it. Now, that's in my world, that's a big compliment.
Yeah.
So, therefore, Lee Strobel is coming, and I cannot wait. To hear from him, and I hope I get to talk to him. It'll be great.
So I hope you're hearing a theme even with his first name. I mean, we had Josh and Sean McDowell last year. We've got Lee Strobel this year. Part of the issues of losing our kids to faith is them not being able to defend their faith. And so we're giving you tools to transfer back in to help moms and dads keep those points of contact of defending the faith when we're at home. We got Robbie Gallaty coming. Robbie's been there before. Mm-hmm. This guy, I wished I had his on-stage charisma. I mean, he can smile and hit such a hard point while delivering it with a smile and with grace in his tone of voice. Very powerful. Robbie is known for his discipleship emphasis in his ministry and in his churches, and he takes life groups, he takes Sunday schools, and he goes a step further. Now, he still has the life groups, he still has the Sunday schools, whatever you want to call it, and the nomenclature is irrelevant. But he goes deeper with what's called a D group, an accountability group where guys or ladies get together outside of the church. Outside of that, they study and read every day and they hold each other accountable. A deeper level. Dana Gresh, Secret Keeper. Wow. I mean, what more? I mean, talk about somebody who can bring something powerful for the culture of our teenagers, specifically our girls. We so need that. Jim Weidman will be there. We talked about him in last week's episode. You can't lose with Jim Weidman. Jeff Wallace from the student leadership side. Kyle Eidelman.
He's coming back?
He's coming. He's going to be there. Incredible. Dale Hudson. We haven't had Dale for several years. And, then we go down to worship. Meredith Andrews.
Oh, cool.
Sometimes I find that conference attendees just like not being the one up on stage and just participating in worship and just listening and note-taking, and I think she will add such a big component to that aspect. We have John Stonestreet from the Chuck Colson Worldview Center.
Yeah, okay.
He will be there. We'll have Scott Taransky and Joanne Miller, and they are huge on parenting. Of course, Dr. Edward Moody and Richard Ross, and we always shoot for diversity of age, diversity of race, diversity of ministry positions. And we have somebody that is no stranger to people who have watched TV and who have seen some incredible Christian movies of recent. You ready for this one, Jeremy?
Drum roll, please.
We almost need music on this one. But those of you who may have watched Duck Dynasty and the families there.
Shut up, no way.
We are going to bring you Sadie Robertson.
You're kidding me.
Can you imagine? Now, take out Phil, take out all the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Let's talk to one of the daughters or granddaughters, as you would, and say, what was it like to grow up in this home? What does faith and values look like being passed along for her? What does church and home mean for Sadie?
All that's really good and everything, but I'm just thinking about the interview where we can do like duck calls and we're going to have so much fun.
Your mind immediately goes to the interview you're going to have with every one of these.
Duck
I know
Dynasty
it.
trivia. This is going to be the best ever.
I have a feeling we're going to have new bumper music for that episode.
It'll be good. That's great. That's a good one.
That is a good one. So we're excited to have her. So this is the type of area where you bring your student pastor, your lead pastor. And here's the challenge I would give to you. The hardest part that you have as a ministry leader is taking your church through a buy-in procedure. How do they buy into the vision you're delivering from the pulpit, from the main stage? you prepare, you study, you know it's right, and you try within 30 minutes or less on a Sunday morning to move them across the Red Sea and trying to part that waters and deal with the mud and the dry ground and the scared. And the best way you can do it is to do what God did and give them a glimpse of where it's going. Bring them with you. Bring the lay leaders to this conference with you, the ones you know are influencers. When you go back and cast vision, if you got people in the pew, so to speak, in the congregation talking about this, you'll move them much faster.
Good job on the preview, my friend. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because the price break's coming up. They're going to be able to save some money. We want to make sure it's like I'm looking at the price. It's a $60 difference.
That's right.
Like, if they go ahead and get that done.
And if you don't know who's coming with you, reserve 10 slots. Fill in the names later.
There you go. Perfect. And if one of those is their boss, the senior pastor, put in the code, bring my boss. No spaces, one word. It's all together. Okay, so thank you for that preview. Hopefully it got people pumped up, d6conference.com. Now, as we look forward to next week, I'm excited about Tony Bianco. He was another great surprise for me. Had no clue about Tony until D6. And then, man, oh man, he blew me away. He has a resource called the Family Technology Plan, which is cool. But and he's a youth minister at a ginormous church. But here, I want to just say this, and we might talk about this a little bit more, but he's got the coolest side gig ever that there are a lot of ministers listening could actually do this side gig. He makes house calls to parents' house and helps them set up their technology, so that they can monitor their kids' technology.
Yeah.
And because, a lot of parents want that, but they don't know how to set it all up. And he gets all their devices talking to each other, sets up the protection software, and he does a house visit.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
he gets the kids and the parents. I'm like, whoa! Like, there are so many technologically friendly ministers that y'all could do that gig. So that's a great idea. So come in next week to learn more from him.
And if you don't know who Tony Bianco is and you're still unsure, I'll give you this one word. He came to us as a recommendation from Richard Ross. That was enough for me.
Yes, sir. And then there's some other guy. I can't pronounce it. What is it? Tommy Swindle?
Yes, Tommy Swindle.
Okay, I don't know.
Do you know who that is? Yeah,
just
Tommy's been our wonderful guide for several years as an MC at the D6 conference, and he's spoken. Very, very capable, but yet a humble, incredible guy. In full disclosure, he is my pastor, and I love him dearly. He's a gifted leader, and he was preaching through a series in our church, and that's what we decided to talk on, and that is prepping to deal with pornography. Not dealing with it, but prepping to deal with it. Because you got to have your ducks in a row if you're going to really open up that can of worms, so to speak, so that you can deal with the fallout and the help and the recovery. And so we're talking through that issue.
So it sounds like we have a great show next week. I think you guys will enjoy it. We hope that you will, and you'll make sure to be with us. I hope you guys have a great week of ministry. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com. And if you're a minister, we invite you to join the D6 Leader Network by going to d6leader.net.